The Calamity mod adds tons of new weapons, armors and bosses to the game, but in this video I decided to see if I can beat the game using only guns. The rules of this challenge are the following. I'm only allowed to use the Ranger class's gun weapons, which means no magical guns. Also, the weapons I'm allowed to use are based on the list the Calamity wiki gives, which mainly means ranged weapons that use bullets as ammo. With all that out of the way, we can begin the challenge and see if my aiming will be as bad as the Stormtroopers, or if I'll be able to quickly beat Supreme Calamitas and the Exomex. Enjoy! Like any other Calamity run, I started by turning on Revengeance mode and opening the starter bag. This time the starter bag really wouldn't be useful as it doesn't contain any guns, which gets us to the first goal of the challenge. Before I get anywhere, I would need to find a gun that I can use. The first gun I wanted was the musket, as it's relatively easy to obtain, so I began to look for my world's corruption biome to find it. I first went to the right where I found the desert, a forest shrine that gave me an early game accessory, and I also found the jungle. I could technically look for the boomstick in there, but unfortunately the jungle bots didn't like this idea, which led me to go to the left and look for the corruption there. Thankfully I found the corruption rather quickly, and I got a musket by breaking a shadow orb. Now that I finally got my first gun for the challenge, I can start farming for an armor and eventually fight bosses. The first armors I can get are the Desert Prowler armor and the Fossil armor. Both of them can be crafted through materials found in the desert biome. After getting enough Storm 1 mandibles from the desert, I crafted 2 parts of the Desert Prowler armor set, and then I had to go look for cobwebs so I can make the final part of the armor. I then used the Farus Instavator item to make searching for life crystals easier, and I gathered some. But then, the goblins decided to invade me and ruin my day. The goblin invasion made me realize that the musket isn't really that great. So after beating the goblins, I decided to transform it into the Undertaker. This is a feature that the Calamity mod adds. It basically allows you to transform Crimson and Corruption items into their counterparts, and vice versa. With my now slightly better gun, I challenged the Eye of Cthulhu. But unfortunately, my aiming was so bad that the fight went on till sunrise, where the eye got enraged and ended my mewing streak. After losing to the eye, I went to try my luck with the Desert Scourge, but little did I know, the new Calamity update made him harder than before. I then realized I had the boss checklist mod turned off all this time. And in hopes of improving my aiming with its markers, I turned it back on. I also went on to get the better armor, which is the Fossil armor. So I mined fossils in the desert and I found an Extractinator. After doing all that, to get back on a winning streak, I challenged the easiest boss in the game, King Slime. And surprisingly, I beat him. To make absolutely sure I don't embarrass myself any further with these easy bosses, I went on to make the Spectre boots for the Eye of Cthulhu. And who would have guessed? I finally beat the Eye of Cthulhu with all that over-prepared gear. The next one on my hit list was the Desert Scourge. This time I finally managed to stay alive long enough to enjoy his reworked fight and sprite. I also managed to finally beat him, though to be perfectly honest, I didn't really need to fight him, as he doesn't drop any gun weapons, while the Eye of Cthulhu at least gives me a good dashing accessory. I then went on to make the most required world arena for Krabylon, using a City Buster. Fun fact, I still didn't beat Krabylon on the first attempt, even with all that. But thankfully the second attempt I beat him, and finally managed to get my hands on a new gun, the Fungicide. Luckily enough, Krabylon dropped it the first time I beat him, which would save me up the trouble of farming him. The Fungicide proved to be a very effective weapon at this stage of the game. With it I managed to beat the Eater of Worlds on the first try. And obviously I also had to make the mandatory world arena with a City Buster, so I can recycle the arena for the Hive Mind as well, you know. The Eater of Worlds didn't have any drops that would be useful for this challenge, neither would the Hive Mind, but I still needed them for the progression. Beating the Hive Mind would unlock me the Air Light ores that can be found in the Sky Islands, so I went on to beat him on the first try as well. And obviously the Fungicide absolutely shredded him, just like how he did with the Eater of Worlds. With these two bosses out of the way, I made my way to Skeletron's dungeon, and unfortunately I couldn't beat him with my current gear. So I made the obvious detour to a Sky Island to get the materials for the Aerospec armor, as well as Skyline wings. Even with those new items, I still couldn't beat Skeletron, so I went on to challenge the Slime God. And I don't know why, but whenever I'm playing Calamity, I'm always having an easier time against the Slime God compared to Skeletron. Even though the Slime God is supposed to be fought after Skeletron, but I don't know. And I also beat the Slime God on the first try. Beating him would also give me access to a new armor, the Statigel armor. This armor will basically be the last armor I use during Pre-Hardmode, so there will be no need to farm for the Necro armor in the dungeon. Also, I can now craft another gun, the Gunk Shot. But to craft all these items I would need more Purified Gel, an item that the Slime God drops. And that's why I went on to beat him one more time. With that out of the way, now I have both the gun and the new armor. I can now make my way to Skeletron for round 3. Being this overpowered obviously helped me beat him easily, and after doing that, I went to the dungeon to get the best painting in the game. With Skeletron being beaten, I can now go to the Abyss and open ancient treasure chests. In one of these chests there would be the final weapon I need for Pre-Hardmode, that being the Archerfish, which as we can see is totally a real gun and not a fish at all. Now it's time to fight the Wolfflesh in the underworld. I didn't want to bother making a proper hell bridge, thinking I would easily beat it, but I was wrong. which led me to go and farm the Swine God for gold so I can get better reforges. And let's say I still had a skill issue, even with these reforges, which led me to die again and again and again, until I finally decided to clear up the underworld, so I don't get stuck in the buildings there. I also used the Fargus Mutant mod, Insta-Bridge item, to make a super long arena platform. But as this was the first time I'm using this mod, I screwed it up and made the arena too high up. But anyway, after doing all that, I still managed to die like 2 more times, until I finally beat the Wall of Flesh, which led me to enter hard mode. As I entered hard mode, I got lucky and got my first gun from Wall of Flesh, the Clockwork Rifle. Though this weapon would not be good enough, so I wanted to go and craft the Thermocline Blaster. In order to make it, I would need to farm some essence from the Ice Biome and the Underworld. I also went on to try the new Nitro Express rifle and craft it as well. Right after doing that, of course, the twins decided to pay me a visit, which obviously absolutely destroyed me, as I didn't even have a hard mode armor. This led me to go gather materials for a Palladium armor, so I can stand a chance against the mechanical bosses. Now you might be wondering why not make titanium armor straight away, instead of the palladium one. Well, that's because the Calamity mod locks the progression of the first hard mode doors behind the mechanical bosses, which means I would have to beat one mechanical boss before I can even get to craft a Mithril Anvil. After crafting the palladium armor, I went on to try another gun in hopes of fixing my skill issue. I wanted to see if the Butcher would be able to save me. But even this new shotgun and its continuously faster fire rate couldn't save me from the twins. After failing against them, I went on to farm for the Ranger emblem, as unfortunately the Wall of Flesh didn't drop it when I first beat it, which led me to challenge it a few more times, though yet again I kept getting all the other class emblems, but not the Ranger one. This left me with no other choice than to go look for the Shimmer in the Ether biome, which should be located somewhere between the jungle and the ocean next to it. And just like any other playthrough, looking for the Shimmer took precious time from my lifespan that I would never be able to recover. I even found the wizard before finding the Shimmer, but soon after I finally found it, and obviously the enemies wouldn't leave me alone to transform my emblems at peace. But anyway, after getting the emblem, I went on to make better accessories like the Amalgamated Brain and the Demon Wings. After getting them, I went on to fight Cryogen in the Ice biome. I wasn't really sure he'd be easier than the twins, as I typically fight him after the mech bosses. But this time it only took me a few tries to beat him, and surprisingly I got better wings from him along with that. I then went on to pay the twins a visit. They didn't stand a chance now. After beating them, I made the Orichalcum gear and bought the random gun the Demolitionist sells after beating one mech boss. And let's be honest, this gun really carried me with the other bosses. After I was finished destroying the destroyer, I made titanium gear. Now it was time to face off against Skeletron Prime. Unfortunately, he beat me up with his overpriced energy drinks, which made me go seek the comfort of the Brimstone Elemental. The Brimstone Elemental is usually an optional boss, but this time I needed to beat her to get a better gun, which is the Hellborn. It has a 10% drop chance and it could make my progression easier. Despite that, the Brimstone Elemental didn't want to go down that easy. Which made me go back to Prime, where I finally beat him. After dealing with Prime, I came back to my wife, where she met her doom, though unfortunately she did not drop the Hellborn gun that I wanted. I then went on to mine some Quarfight and life fruits in the jungle, and shortly after that I crafted the Quarfight armor. This naturally led me to farm the Brimstone Elemental some more, in hopes of getting the Hellborn. I beat her a few more times and I even bought some treasure bags from the Alchemist NPC mod, but unfortunately I still couldn't manage to get the Hellborn gun, which led me to give up on that. After that I went on to fight the Calamitas clone with my thirsty gun given by the Demolitionist. The deep core gun really helped me a lot in early hard mode, so Calamitas shouldn't be a problem for it. Especially now that I have the Quarfight armor and more HP. And yeah, I beat the Calamitas clone on my first try. But this time as well, I did not get a gun from her. This led me to buy a treasure bag from the Operator NPC, and surprisingly I got the animosity on the first treasure bag. With this new gun in my hands, I could now absolutely obliterate Plantera. And I beat her on the first try thanks to the animosity just as expected. The Quarfight bullets saved my ass as well, they were really useful the entire run as my aiming is not the best, to say the least. Before fighting the golem, I decided to give the Leviathan and Anarchita a try, so I went on to the ocean biome. Well, at least what was left from it thanks to the corruption that has spread it so far. Yet again, the Leviathan and Anarchita, just like the other bosses, made sure not to drop any of their useful drops. So I did not get the community or even the Leviathan gun. So anyway, after recovering from my loss, I then crafted the Shroomite gear and was ready to beat the easiest boss in the entire game, who is obviously and always will be the Golem. After easily beating the golem, I went on to fight the Plaguebringer Goliath. I don't know what was wrong with me, but I tried fighting him on the surface, even though he enrages there, and you could guess how that ended. After dying to him, I decided to look for a better gun, as I was using the Ariatis 41 for the golem and here it wouldn't be that great. So I naturally went to my least favorite place in the game, and you guessed it, it's the Abyss. After a quick trip to the Abyss, where I totally didn't suffocate, I crafted the Hailstorm gun from the Scoria ores that I farmed there. Now with this new gun, it was time to fight the Goliath again, this time in the underground jungle. After barely beating him, I crafted the Plague-Tainted SMG from the materials that he dropped. This SMG would be an amazing weapon for the Lunatic Cultist and the Celestial Pillars, especially considering that it has homing shots when you right-click with it. And of course the Blood Moon is rising during my boss fight. Okay, first try. Thankfully. After beating the Cultist and the Solar Pillar, I tried fighting Castrum Diaz. But he didn't like that, so he bullied me into submission, which made me give up on him. This left me to go challenge the Martian invasion, so I can farm for the Xenopauper. After obtaining the Xenopauper, I beat the Vortex Pillar to gather materials for its upgrade. And then I crafted the Vortex Pauper. This weapon is especially good with the qualified bullets that I'm using, and even Moonlord won't stand a chance against it. But yeah, after beating the other pillars, the Moonlord came to fight me. After beating Moonlord in the first attempt with my busted gun, it was time to begin the hardest part of the game. The first thing that I did after beating Moonlord was consuming the Celestial Onion that he drops. It is an item added by the Calamity mod that increases your accessory slots by 1. After that, I upgraded my boots and combined them with the wings. And I also bought a Moonlord treasure bag so I can get all the Luminite needed to craft the Vortex armor. Then I challenged the Moonlord until he dropped the SDMG so I can get a better gun for the Calamity bosses. After getting the gun, I went to fight the Dragon Folly in the jungle. Also, I forgot to mention that I tried using the Onyx Chain Blaster for these bosses, along with Luminite bullets. Well, sometimes I reverted back to the good old aimbot with the qualified bullets, but yeah. The Profaned Guardians didn't drop anything useful for my challenge, other than the Providence boss spawner, which naturally led me to go fight Providence. After Providence whooped my ass a few times, I went on to beat the Dragon Folly again so I can get the Golden Eagle gun. With this new gun, I went back to my Domi Mami and I fought her again. After dying 10 times to the Providence, I finally beat her and now I had the spawner for the next 3 bosses. She also dropped the Elysian Wings, but that wasn't everything I could do once Providence was beaten. I could now go to the jungle and gather materials for the Tarragon armor, and I went to do that. Not only that, but I also crafted the Quarret Cannon by farming enemies in the dungeon and the Brimstone Crags. And with all these new upgrades, the Poltergeist decided to come fight me himself, just as I was making an arena for him. After beating him, I got the Affliction accessory that gives me plenty of stats. Along with that I crafted the Pearl God gun. With the Pearl God I went and challenged yet another worm boss. After beating the Stormweaver, I went to fight Sigmas. With Cygnus and the Stormweaver down, the only one in my way was the Ceaseless Void. With all 3 Sentinels of the Devourer of Gods down, I could now fight the CEO of all worm bosses. Oh, but before that, I had to make sure to fight the worst boss ever, that being the Ravager. I needed to beat him now so I could get materials for my next armor through one of his drops. And after dealing with him, I could now make the Blood Flare armor and go make the Reaper Tooth necklace. With all these new items, I could now go fight the Devourer. And by fight I mean get absolutely destroyed by him. So this led me to go fight the old Duke and hope he drops his gun. After beating him without much trouble, I even got his gun. Now with his new gun, you would think I'd easily beat the Devourer, right? Well, that couldn't be any further from the truth. After that, I tried getting more buff stations on my arena and even gave the Omega Blue armor a chance, but I still couldn't beat him, as unfortunately my dodging skills were absolute garbage. But after reforging all my accessories from menacing to warding, and with a huge dose of luck, I managed to finally beat the oversized worm. After beating the Devourer of Gods, I could now craft the Cosmic Anvil. Along with it I farmed the most annoying events that got on steroids now, such as the Frost Moon, Pumpkin Moon and Solar Eclipse. I needed them to craft the Ascendant Spirit Essence, and along with the Cosmoite bars from treasure bags, I crafted a new gun, the SDFMG, and upgraded my boots and shield too. I also crafted the Godslayer armor and a lot of Godslayer bullets. With all these new upgrades in my arsenal, I could now fight Yaron. But first I had to die to him a lot of times. With Yaron being sent back to the local KFC, I could now get access to some endgame gear. This included upgrading my boots again and also mining some Auric ore, so I can craft the Auric Tesla armor. Along with the King's Bane. Also, for those of you asking, the Dragon's Breath is no longer a gun, but a flamethrower. So yeah, now Yaron does not directly drop any guns that use bullets. With all that out of the way, now all that was left for this challenge were the Exhumex and Supreme Calamitas. I made the mistake to fight Supreme Calamitas first, but I completely forgot how much I sucked at dodging and aiming, and she absolutely punished me for all that. After a lot of frustration, I gave up on Supreme Eagle and I went to fight the Exhumex. After a few tries, I got used to them and they were easier for me to beat. And I'm gonna be honest, I prefer the Exhumex to Supreme Calamitas, because at least when I'm fighting them we hit each other all the time, and this feels more satisfying to me, especially when I compare it to the 15 bullet hell phases of Supreme Calamitas, where I'm not even allowed to hit her back. Unfortunately, I didn't get the gun that the Exhumex dropped because I couldn't leave Artemis and Apollo to be the last ones I beat out of the Exhumex. So yeah, after beating the Exhumex, I got Dryden's gaming chair that would hopefully help me dodge Calamitas' blast. Now I was back at this again, fighting for my life against Supreme Calamitas, and my skill issue was showing, though this time this was way better than before. and then I eventually managed to beat Supreme Calamitas, and with Calamitas being beaten, I could now finally say I've completed my challenge to beat the Calamity mod by only using guns. So yeah, that's about it. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like and subscribe, and also one last thing. I finally made a Discord server, so if any of you are interested in joining it, feel free to do so. You can find a link to it in the description of the video. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.